I really started my walk with God about 10 to 11 years ago, and somewhere within that period, I became born again. Well, before that, I only used to see God as Lord, as this deity that's in heaven that I have to please, or even just like a genie in a bottle that, if I do some certain things or fulfill some certain things that He wants, then He'll grant me my wishes. It was very transactional. I didn't have a relationship with Him. But during that year that I got born again, my dad passed away. And during the days and weeks after he passed away, it was when God started to reveal Himself to me as Father. I remember Him telling me that I shouldn't for 1 second ever say that I don't have a dad, because I have Him. And He's the best dad that I could ever have. He's perfect, meaning that He's not going to make any mistakes and He's never going to leave me alone. For me, I always say that His death should have hit me more than it did. But because I had God, it almost felt like even though I was falling hard, there was a cushion on the ground to catch me. And that cushion was Jesus. And I didn't feel the impact of the fall as hard as I could have been without Jesus. Because although I lost a dad, I wasn't fatherless. I had God. And I'm so grateful to God because over the past 10 years, He has fathered me so well. He has pampered me. He has provided for me. He has protected me. He has loved me. He has corrected me. He has disciplined me. He has taught me so many things. He has listened to me rant and rant on end without judgment. He has never left my side or left me alone or left me helpless. And so why am I saying this? This experience has taught me something that has been solidified even more the past few years, that I've been focusing on the gospel and the grace of God. And it's that Daddy is enough. Jesus is enough. So you don't have to cram the names of God that you need per time for Him to listen to you or for Him to answer your prayers. No, you don't have to call Him Rapha for Him to heal. You don't have to call Him Jireh for Him to provide, and so on. And don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing to know the names of God and to know the characters of God in the Bible. It's really helpful. But know that God doesn't put that pressure on you. He knows what you need per time, and He knows how to supply you what you need per time as your Father. It's not your job to figure it out. It's Daddy's job to figure it out. But don't take my word for it. Let's look at some scriptures. A bit of background before I go into the scriptures. So, in the Old Testament, God revealed Himself to them in bits and pieces based on a situation or a season. He will reveal Himself to them as the I am, and then later on He will be the God who sees me, then the God who provides, and then the God who heals, and so on and so forth. So someone, usually a prophet, would unlock a new name or characteristic of God per season or per situation, but they never had the full picture of who God was. Hebrews 1 verse 1 in the Amplified Version explains it. It says, God, having spoken to the fathers long ago in the voices and writings of the prophets, in many separate revelations, each of which set forth a portion of the truth. So it's saying here that each prophet had only a portion of the truth of who God was. But when Jesus came, He revealed God in His entirety. And verse 2 explains this. Hebrews 1 verse 2, it says, God has in these last days spoken with finality to us in the person of one who is by His character and nature His Son, namely Jesus, whom He appointed heir and lawful owner of all things. So this verse is basically saying that in the last days, God has spoken to us with finality through the person of Jesus. He also says in Colossians 2 verse 9 in the Amplified Version, for in Him, which is Christ, in Him all the fullness of deity, the Godhead, dwells in bodily form, completely expressing the divine essence of God. What these verses mean is that when Jesus came, He embodies the full and complete expression of God, meaning that all the names of God in the Old Testament and all the characteristics of God that we see in the Old Testament, they are all encompassed in that one name, Jesus. Jesus is the full embodiment of who God is. He is the express image of God. He is the sole representation of God. And it gets better. Jesus doesn't only encompass all the names of God that we see in the Old Testament. Jesus came to reveal the most important name of God, which is Abba. Abba means father in the Greek. We see this that throughout the life of Jesus, he only referred to God as father because they had a father-son relationship. And he is our prototype, meaning that he shows us how to be sons and that it's father that God wants us to relate with him as more than any other name. It was only when Jesus was on the cross that he called God Lord. And why that happened is that at that moment, Jesus took on all the sin of the world. He took on the punishment for our sin, and an exchange happened. So he called God Lord, so that when that exchange happens by his death, burial, and resurrection, we now have the privilege of calling God Father. Even the disciples, before Jesus died, at best they were friends of God. It was only after Jesus died that they became sons of God. God became their father. Because it's only after Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection that we are now brought, and when we believe in what Jesus has done, that we are now brought into the family of God. And in a family, you don't have to memorize or cram the titles or the names of your parents per time for them to listen to you or provide for you. My pastor would always give this example of how a baby or a toddler would always cry or shout daddy or mommy whenever they need help. And it's their dad or mom that can discern what that cry means or what that daddy means, whether it's a call for help, whether it's to change a diaper, whether it's hunger, whether it's danger. It's that parent's job to know what the child needs. And the parent is able to discern that. And if our earthly parents can do that, how much more God, who is the perfect Father and who created you and knows you intimately? But like I said before, it's not wrong to know and understand the names of God and the characteristics of God. It helps us understand Him better. But know that it's not a requirement from God for you, for Him to listen to you. And you don't have to feel any less spiritual because you don't know all of these names or you don't remember it when you're praying to God. You're hailing Him by listing out all the names of God during your prayers or your worship does not speed up the process or trigger Him to answer your prayers faster or do anything more for you, because there's nothing more for Him to do after His death, burial, and resurrection, because through that one instance, He has given you everything that you need for life and godliness. So it's not a transactional thing, it's a relationship. So next time you want to call God, know that Jesus is enough. Know that Daddy is enough. Know that Abba is enough. And once you call on Him, He answers you. He listens and He answers you. It's more than enough.